Hello, we're going to take just a few minutes to look over our translation of John chapter 12. This will be in two parts. We're going to look at only verses 1 to 19 in this video segment. So I'm going to share the screen with you of starting with verses 1 to 19. You will see an English translation alongside of your Greek text, which I put here in a bit larger format and also with double spaced, which makes it easier, I think, for us to see it and to discuss it. Discuss being something that I will do on my own. So I guess it's not quite a discussion in the proper sense. But you have already translated this. So if you're now, the time has come for you to finish that. After I post this, any translations that come in after this date are going to be worth only 50% of the original 100%, because you should have already translated John chapter 12. In fact, you should have already translated this week John chapter 13. I think we're going back 2 weeks because I gave you John 12, 1 to 19. And then I gave you the rest of the chapter 20 to 30 last week. So this is 2 weeks, and you should have finished this a long time ago. The translation on the right is by a commentator. Her name is Novakovic, originally from Croatia. And she was, learned Greek and studied originally at in a seminary in Switzerland. I never went there, but I lived close to there for many years. I find her help very valuable. Now, I want to do this because we are reading the Greek text and you're translating. And I want to comment on your translations as in general this way. This is part of CRST 442 Greek reading, which is, of course, one of the two courses which we are doing this semester. We begin, as we look at the text here, with a therefore, un Jesus pro hex hemeron. Easy to overlook that rough breathing with X. It's with hex. It's not X, but hex, which means 6. And of course, it's not then the preposition ek, but the number 6. 6 days, before 6 days of Passover, Pascha is the passing over of the angel that the Jews celebrated when they were delivered from Egypt. They went to Bethany, where was Lazarus, who Jesus raised from the dead, ek nekron. Again, I remind you that in English, we translate this with the article ek nekron because prepositional phrases are considered to be, we say, articular. They are considered to be definite. That means that when we translate prepositional phrases, unless there is a special reason, even though in Greek they don't contain the article, we assume that they are definite. So we say Jesus, Lazarus, whom, hon, accusative case, hon, raised Jesus from the dead. Now notice Jesus is placed last in the sentence, which is also a place of emphasis. The emphatic places in the Greek sentence are either at the beginning, which we refer to as being fronted. A word or a phrase is fronted, means it comes at the beginning, or it's placed at the end for emphasis. That's also a place. From the dead Jesus. Normally it would be Hon Jesus egeran ek necron. Jesus raised from the dead. That will be the normal way of writing, but in order to place Jesus in an emphatic position, whom raised from the dead Jesus. This enables this ability to move the words around because of the inflection, because of the endings and the augments and so on. Also enables the authors to make emphatic statements. When Jesus raised from the dead, in verse 2, therefore, for this reason, or perhaps a little softer, not quite this strong, type of a conclusive preposition or conjunction, rather, because we already had the therefore reaching back into chapter 11 and the context there in verse 1. When we have it in verse 2, I would probably translate so. There was un auto dipnon eke kai he Marta diakone o de Lazaros his in ek ton anakaimenon sun auto. I'm not sure if in the second part of the sentence, ein anakaimenon is paraphrastic. Perhaps not, because it's part of the prepositional phrase ekton anakaimenon, the ones lying or reclining, we say, the ones reclining sun auto, with him. Epoiesan, they were. Now, who is they? We're not sure, quite honestly. Now, Matthew tells us that the person who invited them was a man named Simon the leper, who gave the feast. Now, was Simon the leper the father of the three? Were these his three children, Martha and Mary and Lazarus? We don't know. It doesn't tell us for sure. Possibility, but we're really not sure whose house this is. Is it Lazarus, Mary, and Martha's house, or were they guests here and Martha is serving or was serving? Imperfect tense. Diakone, which is the verb diakoneo. And we know diakonos, which is a word for servant. I'm talking about verse 2. Hey, Martha diakone. The imperfect tense, by the way, is used primarily in the Gospel of John as a way of expressing background material. Someone has said it is the whispering narrator. The narrator is someone who is telling the story, who tells the story. We say he narrates, and what he narrates is called a narrative. It's a fancy way of saying story. we talk about narrative material. And the whispering narrator uses the imperfect tense generally. So in the background, there's someone supplying, as it were, in the fourth gospel, in the Gospel of John, supplying us background information. There was a dinner there. Datenon was the main dinner of the day, just like I think in Pakistan. In the evening comes the main meal of the day. And at this meal, they would recline. They would not be sitting in chairs. They would be lying around a table. The men would be lying at a feast. The men would be eating first. And I think also in Pakistan, this is also a custom. And so the men would be lying, and Lazarus is lying there, reclining, anakamino, reclining with them. In verse 3, after this background material has been given, we have so again, Mary, Mariam, Labusa, Titlitron, Muru, Nardu, Pistekes, Polotimu, Elipsin, Tus Podas to Jesu, Kai ex, ex emaxin, Tais Thrixin, Altes, Tus Podas autu. He de Okia e plerothe ectes osmes tu muru. And then comes a very emphatic statement that is singled out in verse 4 with the present tense, historical present, we call it HP. You get used to me referring to the HP, especially in the Gospel of John, the historical present, lege. He is saying, it isn't so much, again, you know this, it isn't so much expressed this way with the historical present in order to give the progressive. In this place, the idea is to emphasize what is coming. Look out. I want to single out a special statement. So lege, he is saying, now it points forward, and we should pay attention to what he is saying. In a sense, everything up to this point, even in verse 3, is really almost background information, except for verse 3 is a main part. It singles out the worship of Mary, who takes a measure of the different measuring. Some translations pound, and some use other methods of describing the amount. But we're given by Judas, of all people. Of course, he was interested in money. In verse 5, the worth of it, 300 denarii, which is a year's wages. Now, a year's wages in America would be, of course, be a lot more money than it would in Pakistan for the average day labor. But I don't know how much that would be. Let's assume that you have a good job and you earn, I don't know, you earn something like 30,000 a month, and you multiply that times 12. 30 times 12, let's see, 360,000 Pakistani rupees, and is about slightly less because it's 300 denarii, and a denarius was one denarius was a normal laborer's day wage. So let's take 1 month off of that. So instead of 360, let's take well, maybe we should take 2 months. So 300 denarii is 300 days. So that's about 10, I'm having trouble with 300,000 rupees. This amount of ointment was worth 300,000 rupees. That is a lot of money. In fact, it was normally the way that a woman would save her Social Security, is the expression we would use in the United States. The way that she would save for old age, that she would have something saved up. There were banks in those days, but they were very complicated, not like banks today. So it wasn't unusual to keep some kind of, for some kind of method, something very valuable like this, instead of keeping cash lying around, or better said, coins lying around. Coins were, we know the parable of the lost coins, or the lost coin. So there were coins, but also this was a way, very costly perfume might be used, but might also simply be saved, a way of saving money. And she takes maybe all of it, I don't know. And then washes the feet of Jesus with her hair. Not only is it scandalous that she uses this huge amount of money, but that she uses her hair, secondly, and that she uses her hair to wipe the feet of Jesus. Now, even to ask a slave to wash your feet was, in some areas of the Roman Empire, illegal. It was considered so degrading that the Romans didn't allow for it. That wasn't uniformly true. So there could be some areas, and Palestine may have been one of them. We don't really know so much about Palestine, to be quite honest, in the 1st century. There is much that is hidden from us, and I think perhaps God in his whatever in his intentions made it that way. We just don't know as much as we would like about 1st century life in Palestine. We don't know as much as we would like about the Pharisees. We don't know as much as we would like about many things, but we do know some things. And we do know that it was scandalous and that it was unheard of to wash someone's feet. A slave might do that, or might be ordered to do that, and must do that. But for someone to volunteer to do that, as we will find in chapter 13, when Jesus does it, is, well, this was scandalous. A woman washing a man's feet. But Jesus explains afterwards what it is for. Now, before we have that, we have this significant statement that is singled out with verse 4 with, sorry, I need to move my text down. We have this statement. I can also use my annotation. I forgot about that, and I'll do that. When we come down to verse 4, we can, again, lege singles out the statement to follow. Remember, the historical present is usually followed by a statement in the aorist tense, which we have here in this infinitive, paradidonai. Before that, Judas ho Iscariotes, ho Iscariotes, hes ek ton matheton autou, who was from the village of Iscariot, which is in Judea. It singles him out because there was another disciple of the 12 who also was named Judas, but he was from a different place. So in order to distinguish them, it's Judas of Iscariot, one of the disciples, one of his disciples, um, of course, who melon participle, who was being about to, or as we have to translate it in English, who was about to betray him. But I'm just trying to emphasize the continuous nature of the present tense generally, who was being about to betray him, or who was about to him to give over, paradidomi, to give over, in this sense, to betray him. And he asks a question. Notice we have a question mark at the end of verse 5. Why was this ointment, muron, not sold? Epathe was sold, not uk. So we have theta, eta. We have an aorist passive. Notice, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii? And edophe, again, we have the aorist passive, and was given, aorist passive. The ointment is not acting, but the ointment is acted upon. The ointment not given to klochois. Not makes perfect sense, of course, naturally. What is going on here? This could be given to the poor. But we have some additional information, which interestingly is we have the whispering narrator with the imperfect tense. He said this not because he was being concerned, he was being, he had concern for the poor, of the poor. Peri ton ptochon emelin auto. But because thief he was being, and the one in charge of the money bag, and he stole the things cast into it, balomina. Echon then is a causal, adverbial causal participle. Of course, it's clear from hoti here that it's causal, because hoti here would mean because, kleptes, because a thief, he was being. Remember, this is now the whispering narrator with the imperfect tense. It started here with emelin and ein, and he is having, present tense, the things he was stealing, ebastazen, I don't practice this enough beforehand. Kai glosokomon echon tabalomena ebastazen. And he was stealing the things which were cast, balomena. Notice that here we have a present passive participle of balo. The things which were thrown, which were cast into the, what do they call this? Money bag, the glossokomon. Echon is adverbial causal, connecting with hoti. Hoti is causal, and it shows us that echon is causal. Now, it's not always so simple to determine, as you know, which usage of an adverbial participle we have. But in this case, we have the cause here, hoti, because. So it's not hard to say that this participle echon is adverbial causal, because he was stealing the things which were thrown or which were cast into the money bag. We still haven't finished this statement. What we have first is Judas speaking, and then Jesus responding as part of this significant statement, which began back here in verse 4, lege. This set the scene, lege, Judas Iscariot. This set the scene for this statement, but Jesus responds to it, aphes autein, leave her, aphiemi. Aphes is the aorist imperative. We haven't had the imperative mood yet. We don't get it until chapter 26, I think. Yes, it is chapter 26, aphes autein. We get it this semester, but in the textbook, we haven't gotten there yet. Jesus said, so Jesus said in response, looking back and making a conclusion or showing a reason for the previous information, leave her alone. Aphiemi, most students like to translate aphiemi as forgive, but here it doesn't mean forgive. It just means leave. Leave her alone. Hinna. Why does Jesus use here hinna when we have hoti? Well, for one thing, Jesus didn't start speaking until verse 7. And the other thing is, this is part of the narrator. Hoti, he was a thief. But here, Jesus is saying, in order that, say, I think, leave her, she kept it. Terese, notice again the aorist tense. These important statements are usually in the aorist tense after following the historical present. Jesus said, leave her alone, because unto the day of the burial of me, she has kept it. Now, not sure what it is. Is it is it referring to the whole thing that she had, or is it referring to part that she hasn't yet poured out? She has kept some back. I kind of like that explanation. That makes more sense to me. Auto, referring to the part that she hasn't yet used on her feet, on his feet. She has kept the rest for his burial. Now, we know from chapter 19 that Joseph of Arimathea brought spices to to anoint Jesus, but we also know from the other gospels that they came, and I think the Gospel of John as well, that they came the women came with spices on the day of his resurrection, and they didn't get to use them because his body had risen from the dead. And I like to think, although it's not emphasizing that at all, it doesn't say it, I like to think that Jesus didn't want them or said, you keep the rest, you will need it. But her purpose, the reason she is doing this is she's keeping it for his burial. The most important thing for her is to honor and worship Jesus. And he stresses that the poor, tochus, the poor ones, trochos is used, an adjective is used here as a noun. The poor people in the accusative case, for looking back, explaining, giving further information, reason. For the poor always you are having with you. Me, however, de hardly ever connects simply with and or something. De is much stronger than kai. Eme de u pantoche echete. Me, you are not always having with you, meaning, of course, his physical body. And she is taking the opportunity to worship Jesus and to honor him. And we have here then a lesson in worshiping Jesus and putting him first. And if I were preaching on this passage, quite honestly, I would really be tempted, and not only tempted, but I think I would ask the question, what is it that you truly worship? And this always touches our money. And it doesn't matter how much money we have. It's not just the rich people who should honor God with their money. Notice in 2 Corinthians at the end of chapter 8, no, at the beginning of chapter 8 in 2 Corinthians, Paul said that it was the poor people, the poor Christians in Macedonia who gave the most. And in my own experience, it has been those who have the least who give the most because they love Jesus. Their love for him is so strong. And those who have a lot don't give very much to Jesus or to his cause or for reaching out with the gospel, because really they worship their money and they don't worship him. And we see a big example of this. And I would contrast Mary with Judas, not only because it fits, but because it seems to be the main emphasis that, or one of the main emphases that John is making by telling this story. Then we go on in verse 9. Egno un achlos Paulus ekton judaion hoti eke estin kai elfon u dia ton Jesum monon al hinna kai ton Lazaron idosin ton egeren ek necron. Which points forward, of course, to the resurrection of Jesus. But they came to see not only Jesus, Jesus only, monon, but in order also that they might see. So remember, we have a purpose clause with a subjunctive. So if I ask you, what use of the subjunctive do we have here? And what tense is the verb? I hope that you recognize idosin as aorist. Again, I don't think we have come to the end, actually, of this important statement. I know that they make a paragraph here in the text, but there is no paragraph in the original manuscript. And I don't think we should make a paragraph here, because a great crowd from the Jews came there, not because of Jesus only, but in order that they might see aorist tense, whom Jesus raised from the dead. The implied subject of egeren, the aorist tense here, ek necron, is Jesus raised Lazarus, which we know from chapter 11. Now, the fact that there is a great crowd coming to Bethany is important, because it's going to give us background information also for what follows. But in the meantime, we have a de, which may or may not indicate a change in our paragraph. I don't think so. I think this de here actually just shows us the change in the subject, which is the high priests. plural, because there was more than one high priest. Uh, the high priests were wanted or desired that, and we have here the 10th use of the subjunctive. Remember that there is a use of the subjunctive that uses hinna and this phrase as a noun phrase. What did they want? They wanted to kill that also Lazarus they might kill. That also Lazarus is the object of this subjunctive verb. That they might, they wanted that they might kill Jesus. They might kill Lazarus, sorry. Poor Lazarus had already died, but they wanted to put him to death again. I hope they did not succeed. The Bible doesn't tell us. It concentrates on Jesus and his resurrection. Because many came, or many were coming, and now we're back to the whispering narrator in the imperfect, were coming of the Jews, were coming because of Lazarus, and were believing in Jesus. Not only believing in Jesus, but believing into Jesus. They were actually entrusting their lives to Jesus. They were coming into a relationship with Jesus. That's John's way of saying that with the accusative. On the next day, verse 12, a great crowd came that had come to the festival, hearing, when they heard, temporal, acous antes is a temporal participle, adverbial temporal, or when they heard or after they heard that Jesus is coming, erchetai, into Jerusalem, they took fronds, we would say in America at least, fronds of palm trees or palm branches, and they went out into the meeting to him, and they were crying out, Hosanna. Now, Hosanna, of course, is the Hebrew word, and we have here, because you notice italics font, this is a quotation from Psalm 118. And notice the words they use, Ha Basilus to Israel, the king of Israel. And again, repeated in verse 15, the Basilus su erchetai. Now, this is, of course, insurrection, the king of Israel. And no surprise that the Pharisees wanted them to shut up. This could cause the Romans to come down on their heads. But Jesus' kingdom is not of this world, as he will explain later to Pilate. Hosanna is a word of praise. It actually means save us. But by this time, this Hebrew word had probably come to mean simply a shout of praise. Blessed, eulogimenos. He is blessed, who is coming, erchomenos, again, a participle in the name of the Lord. I'm going to stop at this point without trying to comment on all of the verses, but I hope that this gives you enough of an impression. One other thing I wanted to mention, and I think I will stop sharing at this point. One other thing I wanted to mention, and that is that we have two crowds mentioned in the text. We have one, I think, in verse 12, if I remember correctly. Yes, Achlos Paulus, a great crowd. Achlos Paulus, great, verse 12. But there's another crowd that's mentioned again down in verse 18, Achlos, that came out of the city. So there's a crowd with Jesus that came to see him and Lazarus, who whom he had raised from the dead. And then there's a crowd that comes out of the city. These would be pilgrims who came to the Pascha, who came to the Passover, the passing over of the angel over God's people. So the judgment was not put out on his people in Exodus, in the book of Exodus. There are two crowds. As an important point, that these were the followers of Jesus, those who came behind him, with him from Bethany down the Mount of Olives to the city of Jerusalem to enter in through the eastern gate, and those who came out of that gate with palm branches to meet him. Now, don't confuse them with the crowd that cried out, crucify him on Good Friday. That's a completely different group of people. And there I have heard preachers say how quickly they changed their minds and became and cried out, crucify. No, the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the high priest got some people together that were on their side and paid them, probably. We don't know for sure. I think there's no exact expression, but got them early in the morning. They brought Jesus to Pilate, and they got Jesus on the cross before anybody could really know what was happening. It happened very quickly. They wanted rid of him, and they had to do it, quick. And that group was completely different. So it's not that they suddenly changed their minds to believing in him and then rejecting him. No, that was not the case. Instead, what they did after Jesus was crucified was they went and hid themselves and locked themselves away because they were very scared of what might happen to them if they think that Jesus is going to be made king. They want to make sure and get rid of his followers. The question for us is really, I think, in this passage, whom do we worship? What do we worship? There are times in which we need to give everything to Jesus. Do we give all of our money to him? Everything that we saved up? That might have been what Mary did. There are times in which we might be led to do that. Not sure that it teaches that, except that it does teach that she didn't worship money. And most people do. Really, honestly, most people do. Even most of us Christians are very concerned about our money. Are we more concerned about our money than we are about loving Jesus? That's a question we should ask, and we should ask those whom we teach. This is the end of my comments on John chapter 12, verses 1 to 19. And next time we will look at the rest of the chapter, verses 20 to 50, which you should have translated last week. So God bless you, and do a good job of translating John chapter 13 for this week. And next week, be prepared for your oral exam and for your midterm exam on